I stood in the shadows of the banquet hall, watching my sister Brianna toast with a glass of vintage sparkling wine. She looked radiant in her couture gown, the silk shimmering under the chandeliers. She truly believed the $3 million in the trust fund was her ticket to a life of luxury. She had no idea that the money wasn't a gift. It was a wiretap. She thought she was launching a business empire. I knew she was signing her own confession. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The rain in Seattle does not wash things clean. It just makes the dirt heavier. It turns the earth into a thick, clinging mud that threatens to pull you down and never let you go. I stood there, my heels sinking into the sodden grass of the cemetery, feeling the water seep into my shoes. It was a cold, physical discomfort that grounded me, preventing me from floating away into the absolute numbness that had been threatening to consume me for days. The priest was speaking. His voice was a low drone, fighting against the sound of the downpour battering the canopy of black umbrellas. He was talking about angels. He was talking about innocence returning to the source. It was a beautiful sentiment, I suppose. It was the kind of thing you pay a stranger to say when there are no words left in your own throat. But I was not listening to the words. I was listening to the silence to my right. I turned my head slowly, the movement feeling mechanical, like a rusted hinge. There, in the front row, were 4 folding chairs. Black metal, padded seats slick with rainwater. They were reserved for the immediate family. They were empty. I stared at them. I stared at the way the rain pooled in the depression of the seats, creating little dark lakes. Those chairs were supposed to hold my support system. They were supposed to hold my mother, Evelyn, who always claimed that family was the bedrock of civilization. They were supposed to hold my father, Martin, who prided himself on his punctuality. They were supposed to hold my sister, Brianna, and her fiancé, Caleb. I checked my watch. My wrist felt thin, fragile under the weight of the metal band. It was 10:15 in the morning. The service had started 15 minutes ago. They were late. That was the lie I told myself. I wrapped that lie around me like a blanket. They were just late. Traffic in the city was terrible on Tuesdays. Maybe there was an accident on the bridge. Maybe their private car had a flat tire. My brain, the overactive engine that had made me a successful project manager, started generating scenarios. I visualized the car breaking down. I visualized my father arguing with a tow truck driver. I visualized my mother frantically trying to call me, but the signal was down. I reached into my coat pocket and gripped my phone. It was silent. No vibrations, no missed calls. The silence of the phone was louder than the rain. If they were in trouble, they would have called. If they were stuck, they would have texted. My family was not the type to suffer in silence. They broadcast their inconveniences to the world. If a barista got my mother's order wrong, I would hear about it for 3 days. If they were missing the funeral of their only grandchild, there had to be a catastrophic reason, unless there wasn't. I looked back at the small white casket. It looked so small. It shouldn't be possible for a human life to fit into a box that size. Lucas, my Lucas. He was 7 years old. He loved monster trucks and the color orange. He was afraid of the dark unless he had his glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Now he was going into the dark forever. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I swallowed it down, tasting bile. I could not collapse. Not here. Not in front of the priest and the funeral director. I had to be the rock. That was my role. I was Natalie the fixer, Natalie the steady one. Even at my own son's funeral, I felt the crushing pressure to manage the optics, to make sure everything went smoothly. But you cannot manage an absence. You cannot spin an empty chair. The rain kept falling, relentless and indifferent. It drummed against the casket, a hollow, rhythmic tapping that sounded like a clock counting down. I looked at the empty chairs again. The water was overflowing now, dripping onto the fake green turf. They weren't coming. The realization hit me, not with a bang, but with a slow, creeping coldness that started in my fingertips and worked its way to my heart. They weren't late. They were absent. The service ended. I didn't remember the closing prayer. I just remembered the sound of the winch lowering the casket into the wet earth. It was a mechanical grinding noise, harsh and industrial, completely at odds with the softness of the flowers I had chosen. Mr. Sullivan, the family lawyer, stepped up beside me. He was a good man, I thought. He had been with my parents for years, handling their estate planning and their endless refinancing schemes. He held a large black umbrella, tilting it so that it covered me more than him. His left shoulder was getting soaked, the expensive fabric of his suit darkening with water. "Natalie," he said softly. His voice was gravelly, filled with a professional sort of sympathy that I suddenly found enraged me. "Do you want to wait a few more minutes before the burial is complete?" I knew what he was asking. He was asking if I wanted to stall. He was looking at the empty chairs, too. He knew. He had to know. He was the one who had sent them the itinerary. He was the one who had arranged the car service at my request. "No," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was flat, hollow. It sounded like it belonged to a stranger standing 3 feet away. "If they aren't here by now, Mr. Sullivan, they aren't coming." He shifted his weight uncomfortably. He looked down at his polished shoes, avoiding my gaze. "There could be a misunderstanding," he offered weakly. "Perhaps the flight times or the weather." "I sent them the itinerary 3 weeks ago," I said. The words tasted like ash. "I confirmed it yesterday. I paid for the hotel suite downtown because Mom said the traffic from the airport would be too stressful." I thought about that conversation. My mother, on the phone, complaining about the thread count of the sheets at the hotel I had booked. She hadn't asked how I was holding up. She hadn't asked about the funeral arrangements. She had asked if the hotel had a spa. I had brushed it off then, telling myself everyone grieves differently. Maybe she needed a massage to handle the trauma of losing her grandson. I had made excuses for her. I had spent my entire life making excuses for her. Mr. Sullivan sighed. It was a heavy, defeated sound. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. "I wasn't going to bring this up today," he said, lowering his voice. It seemed inappropriate, but given the circumstances, the hospital settlement cleared this morning. I looked at the envelope. It was just paper. Inside was a receipt, a confirmation of a wire transfer, $2,500,000. That was the number the insurance actuaries had come up with. That was the value they had placed on a surgical error that stopped my son's heart. "Okay," I said. I didn't reach for it. I didn't want to touch it. "It is a significant sum, Natalie," Mr. Sullivan said, pressing the envelope into my hand. "And your parents. They are aware of the amount." I looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "They called my office," he said. He looked pained. "Yesterday and this morning. They wanted to know if the funds would be available immediately. They were very persistent." My stomach twisted. While I was picking out flowers for the casket, they were calling the lawyer about the money. While I was writing a eulogy I could barely see through my tears, they were checking the balance. "They think it's theirs," I whispered. It wasn't a question. Mr. Sullivan didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was a confirmation. He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture meant to be comforting but felt heavy. "You need to be careful, Natalie. Grief makes people do strange things, but greed makes them predictable." He walked away toward his car, leaving me alone by the grave. The gravediggers were waiting by their truck, respectful but impatient. They wanted to finish the job. They wanted to go home out of the rain. I stood there, clutching the envelope that felt like it was burning my skin. I needed to know. I needed to know where they were. I needed to stop making excuses and start facing the reality. I pulled my phone out again. My thumb hovered over the screen. I was afraid of what I would find. Part of me, The part that was still a frightened little girl wanting her mommy, hoped to see a text about a medical emergency. I hoped my father had had a heart attack. God, how sick was that? I was praying for a catastrophe to explain their cruelty, because if there wasn't a catastrophe, then this was a choice. And if it was a choice, I didn't think I could survive it. I unlocked the screen. No texts, no voicemails. But there was a notification from Instagram. It was from 20 minutes ago. Brianna B. Vibes is live, manifesting my best life. I stared at the words, manifesting, best life. The cognitive dissonance made me dizzy. I was standing in a graveyard in the rain, burying my son. My sister was live streaming. My finger shook as I tapped the notification. The app opened. The silence of the cemetery was shattered by the tinny, distorted sound of upbeat electronic dance music blasting from my phone speaker. I frantically thumbed the volume down, looking around to see if the gravediggers had heard. They were watching me, their faces blank. I looked at the screen. The image was bright, blindingly bright. It was full of burnt orange rocks and piercing blue sky. It wasn't Seattle. It wasn't a funeral home. It was Sedona, the red rocks of Arizona. Brianna was holding the camera selfie style. She was wearing a white crop top and yoga pants, her face fully made up with contouring and fake lashes. She looked flawless. She looked happy. "Hey guys," she shouted over the wind. "Okay, so the signal out here is trash, but the energy is literally vibrating. We are at the vortex." She spun the camera around. There was my mother, Evelyn. She was wearing a turquoise caftan and oversized sunglasses, holding a crystal the size of a grapefruit. She was laughing. She was throwing her head back and laughing at something my father had said. My father, Martin, was sitting on a rock, wearing a safari hat and smoking a cigar. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man on vacation. And there was Caleb, Brianna's fiancé. He was shirtless, flexing his muscles for the camera, holding a bottle of champagne. He popped the cork, spraying it into the dry desert air. "Happy birthday to my queen!" Caleb shouted, wrapping an arm around Brianna's waist. I froze. Birthday? I checked the date on my phone. Today was Tuesday. Brianna's birthday was next week. They were celebrating early. They had skipped the funeral to go on an early birthday trip to Sedona. Brianna pulled the camera back to her face. "We just had to get away, you know," she said to her followers. Her voice took on that fake, earnest tone influencers use when they're trying to sell you tea that makes you lose weight. There was just so much heavy, toxic energy back home, so much gloom. We needed a vibe shift. We needed to reset our chakras and focus on abundance. Toxic energy, gloom. That's what she called my son's death. That's what she called my grief. "So we are officially declaring this the year of Brianna," she squealed. "No more bad vibes, only success, only wealth, only happiness. We are manifesting a massive windfall, guys. I can feel it coming. The universe is about to drop a huge gift in our laps." My mother leaned into the frame. "You deserve it, baby girl," she said, kissing Brianna on the cheek. "New beginnings. That's what matters. Leaving the past in the past." I watched them. I watched them toast to leaving the past in the past. The past was my son. The past was the 7-year-old boy being lowered into the ground 3,000 miles away. They weren't stuck in traffic. They weren't in the hospital. They were in a vortex in Arizona, drinking champagne and celebrating the windfall they thought was coming. The windfall was the settlement money. They were celebrating Lucas's death check. I didn't scream. I thought I would. I thought I would throw the phone against a tombstone and howl at the sky. But the scream got stuck in my throat. It calcified instantly. The heat of my rage turned into something else. It turned into ice. I looked at their smiling faces on the small screen. They looked so confident. They looked so sure that I would be waiting for them when they got back, ready to write checks, ready to forgive, ready to be the doormat I had always been. Manifesting abundance. I whispered to the empty air. I tapped the screen and ended the video. I walked back to the grave. The workers had finished lowering the casket. They were waiting for the signal to start filling it in. I nodded to them. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, tipped his hat. He started shoveling the wet dirt. The sound was heavy. Thud, thud, thud. I stood there until the hole was filled. I stood there until the mound of dirt was shaped and the flowers were placed on top. I was soaked to the bone. My hair was plastered to my skull. My dress was ruined. But I didn't feel the cold anymore. I walked to my car. It was a sensible gray sedan, the kind of car a responsible mother drives. I got in and closed the door, sealing out the sound of the rain. The silence inside the car was deafening. I put the key in the ignition but didn't turn it. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. I looked at my hands. They were pale, shaking slightly. These were the hands that had held Lucas when he was born. These were the hands that had smoothed his hair when he had a fever. These were the hands that had signed the permission form for the surgery that killed him. And these were the hands that my family expected to write them checks. I thought about the years of loans I had given them, the investments in my father's failed business ventures, the bailouts for Brianna's credit card debt. I had always done it. I had done it because I wanted them to love me. I wanted to be the good daughter. I wanted to prove that I was successful, that I was valuable. I realize now, sitting in that cold car, that I had never been valuable to them. I had just been useful. There is a difference. You value a person. You use a tool. When a tool breaks, you throw it away. When a person breaks, you support them. They hadn't supported me. They had gone to Sedona. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud break. It was quiet, like a dry twig stepping on in a forest. It was the sound of the tether that bound me to them finally severing. "No more," I said aloud. My voice was raspy in the enclosed space. "No more." I started the car. The engine purred to life. I didn't drive home. I couldn't go back to that empty house, to the room with the dinosaur wallpaper and the bed that would never be slept in again. Not yet. I had an errand to run. The bank was a fortress of glass and steel in the financial district. It was dry inside. It smelled of floor wax and money. I walked in, dripping water onto the marble floor. The security guard gave me a look, his hand drifting toward his belt, but he stopped when he saw my face. I must have looked like a ghost. Or a banshee. I walked up to the teller. She was a young woman with bright pink nails. "I need to verify a wire transfer," I said. She typed on her keyboard. "Name?" "Natalie Davis." She paused. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked at the screen. "Oh, yes, Ms. Davis. One moment, please. I'll get the branch manager." Of course. The amount was too high for a teller. The manager came out. He was a slick man in a cheap suit who smelled of breath mints. He ushered me into a glass-walled office. He offered me coffee. I refused. "The funds arrived this morning," he said, pushing a piece of paper across the desk. $2,500,000. It's fully cleared. I looked at the number. 2,500,000. It was just a number on a screen. But it wasn't just a number, it was Lucas. It was his laughter. It was his future. It was every birthday he would never have, every scraped knee, every first date, every graduation. They had distilled my son's entire existence into a string of digits. "Do you want to discuss investment options?" the manager asked, his eyes gleaming. "We have some excellent high-yield portfolios." "No," I said. "I want a cashier's check." He blinked. "For the full amount?" "No," I lied. Just the receipt. I want the physical receipt showing the balance. And I want to set up a new account, a separate one, under a trust." "A trust?" "Yes," I said. "The Lucas Davis Memorial Trust." He typed it in. "And who are the beneficiaries?" I hesitated. My family thought they were the beneficiaries. They thought this money was their manifested windfall. "Just me for now," I said. "I'll add the others later." I walked out of the bank 10 minutes later, holding the deposit receipt in my hand. I stared at it. $2,500,000. It felt heavy in my pocket, like a stone. I drove home. I walked into my silent house. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the floor of the living room in the dark, and I opened the Instagram app again. I watched the video of them in Sedona. I watched it over and over again. I memorized every laugh. I memorized every toast. I memorized the way my mother looked at Brianna with the love she had never shown me. I let the hate fill me up. I let it displace the grief. Grief is passive. Grief is drowning. Hate is active. Hate is a fuel. I was going to need a lot of fuel. They came back 3 days later. They didn't call. They didn't ask if I was up for visitors. They just descended. I was in the kitchen, making tea I didn't intend to drink, when the front door burst open. My parents had keys. I had given them a spare set years ago, in case of emergencies. Apparently, returning from a vacation was an emergency. "Natalie!" My mother's voice boomed through the hallway. "We're home!" The smell hit me first. Coconut tanning oil and duty-free perfume. It was a sickly, sweet scent that clashed violently with the stale air of my grief-stricken house. They swept into the kitchen. They were glowing. Their skin was bronzed, their teeth white against the tan. They looked healthy. They looked vibrant. They looked like they had just stepped out of a magazine ad for a luxury resort. I looked down at my own hands. My skin was gray. I hadn't washed my hair in 3 days. I was wearing the same sweatpants I had worn to bed. "Oh, honey," my mother said, stopping in the doorway. She looked me up and down with a grimace that she probably thought looked like sympathy. "Look at you. You look terrible." "Hi, Mom," I said. My voice was a croak. "We tried to call," my father lied, breezing past her to put a heavy suitcase on my kitchen table. "Cell service was spotty." "You posted a live stream," I said. My father froze for a second, then recovered. Wi-Fi at the hotel was okay, but calls? Terrible. Brianna bounced in behind them, with Caleb trailing her like a puppy. Brianna was wearing a turquoise necklace I recognized. It was from a designer boutique in Scottsdale. It cost at least $800. I knew because I had paid her credit card bill last month, and she had sworn she was cutting back. "Nia!" Brianna squealed. She came over and gave me a side hug, careful not to get my grease on her white linen shirt. "Oh my God, I missed you. Sedona was life-changing. You seriously need to go. The vortexes, they cleared so much blockage for me." "Blockage," I repeated. "Yes, emotional blockage," she said, tapping her chest. "I feel so light. I feel ready to receive." Caleb leaned against the counter. He was wearing a shirt that was unbuttoned one too many buttons. He gave me a tight, practiced smile. "Rough week, huh, Nat?" "Rough week," I said. "I buried my son on Tuesday." The room went silent. The air was suddenly sucked out of the kitchen. My mother let out a loud, dramatic sigh and dropped her purse on the counter. "Natalie, please," she said, her tone sharp. "Don't start. We just got in the door. We're exhausted. The flight was a nightmare. We had to sit in Economy Plus because first class was full." "I'm sorry your flight was hard," I said, the sarcasm dripping so thick I thought I might choke on it. "It rained at the funeral. The chairs were empty." "We were there in spirit," my father said, opening the fridge and grabbing a beer without asking. "We lit a candle for the kid at the chapel in the rocks. It was very moving." "The kid," I said. "His name was Lucas." "We know his name, Natalie," my mother snapped. "God, you're being so aggressive. This is exactly why we needed the break. Your energy, it's just so heavy. It's suffocating. You're wallowing." "Wallowing?" I stared at her. "It's been 4 days. And he's in a better place," Brianna chimed in, grabbing my hand. She shoved her left hand in my face. The diamond on her ring finger caught the light. It was new. It was huge. "Look, Caleb upgraded the ring. Can you believe it? He did it at sunset on the red rocks. It was magical." I looked at the ring. It was at least 2 carats. Caleb was a freelance consultant who hadn't had a steady gig in 2 years. "How did you pay for that, Caleb?" I asked, looking at him. He shrugged, a smug grin playing on his lips. "Investments, Nat. Things are looking up. Big time." He winked at my father. My father winked back. They knew. They all knew about the money. They had spent money they didn't have yet, counting on the fact that I would hand over the settlement. They had upgraded rings and flown to Sedona on credit, using Lucas's death as collateral. "We need to talk," my mother said, clapping her hands. "Family meeting, living room, now we have big news, and we have a plan for you." "A plan for me?" I asked. "Yes," she said, steering me toward the living room like a wayward child. "We're going to fix this. We're going to fix you." I let them lead me. I let them sit me down in the chair while they took the sofa. I let them think I was broken. I let them think I was pliable. But as I looked at their tanned faces and their greedy eyes, I wasn't thinking about fixing myself. I was thinking about the receipt in my pocket. I was thinking about the empty chairs, and I was thinking about how much I was going to enjoy burning their world to the ground. I sat in the stiff armchair, the one my mother had always hated because the upholstery was too pedestrian. She was perched on the edge of the velvet sofa, leaning forward with an intensity that usually signaled she was about to ask for a favor or criticize my haircut. This time, I knew it was something far bigger. The air in the room felt thick, pressurized, like the cabin of a plane before a crash. My father, Martin, was pacing by the fireplace. He was trying to look contemplative, stroking his chin, but I could see the tremor in his hands. He needed a drink. He needed a win. Caleb was leaning against the mantel, trying to look like a titan of industry in his unbuttoned shirt, but he just looked like a man who was afraid of silence. "So," my mother began, her voice dropping to a whispery, reverent register. "We've been doing a lot of thinking, Natalie. About you, about Lucas." My stomach tightened at the sound of his name in her mouth. It felt like a violation. "About Lucas," I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes," she said, nodding slowly, "and about this settlement, the $2.5 million. She said the number slowly, tasting every syllable. 2,500,000. "It's a lot of money," Brianna chimed in, her eyes wide and innocent. "Like life-changing money." "It's blood money," my father interrupted. He stopped pacing and looked at me with a grave expression that he probably practiced in the mirror. "Let's call a spade, Nat. It came from tragedy. It carries a heavy vibration, dark energy." I stared at him. "It's insurance money, Dad. It came from a hospital liability fund." "It's death money," my mother corrected gently, placing a hand over her heart. "And you are in no state to manage that kind of negativity. You're grieving. You're fragile. If you keep that money, if you let it sit in your account, it's going to eat you alive. It's going to be a constant reminder of what you lost. Every time you spend a dime, you'll think, this is because my son died." I wanted to vomit. The manipulation was so clumsy, yet so precise. They were trying to frame their greed as spiritual protection. They weren't trying to rob me. They were trying to save me. "We want to help you unburden yourself," Caleb said, stepping forward. "We want to transmute that negative energy into positive action." "Transmute," I said. "Is that what we're doing?" "Exactly." Brianna clapped her hands. "Okay, so hear us out. You know how I've always been passionate about holistic health, and how Caleb has been looking for the perfect real estate play? I didn't know either of those things. I knew Brianna liked expensive smoothies, and Caleb liked gambling on sports apps. "We found a property in Oregon," Brianna continued, rushing her words now, the excitement bubbling over. "It's a distressed asset, 80 acres. It used to be a logging camp, but the zoning is perfect for a retreat center. We're going to call it the Lucas Davis Wellness Sanctuary." She beamed at me, waiting for applause. I stared at her. You want to use my son's name? It's a legacy play, Caleb said, nodding sagely. We build a luxury retreat, high-end yurts, a farm-to-table restaurant, a vineyard component. We charge $5,000 a week for detox programs. It honors Lucas by creating life, growth, revenue. And the best part, my mother added, leaning in, is that you won't have to do a thing. You're the silent investor. You sign the check, we handle the build, and you get to heal. You get to walk away from the pain while we build the empire. I looked at them, really looked at them. They had this all worked out. The script, the roles, the emotional blackmail. They wanted me to pay them $2.5 million to take my son's name and slap it on a glamping site for rich tourists. They wanted to turn my tragedy into their ATM. The property is $1.8 million, Caleb said, checking his watch as if he had another meeting to get to. But we need operating capital, renovations, marketing. So if we transfer the full 2.5 into a joint LLC, we can break ground by next month. Joint LLC, I whispered. Managed by who? Me, obviously, Caleb said. I have the business acumen. And Brianna is the creative director, my mother said proudly. And your father and I will handle operations. Operations. My father hadn't operated a toaster successfully in 10 years. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a jagged, hysterical thing. They truly believed this. They truly believed I was stupid enough, broken enough to hand over everything. The silence stretched. They were all watching me, their eyes hungry, waiting for the nod, waiting for the yes. So, I said quietly, let me get this straight. You skipped Lucas's funeral. We were manifesting, Brianna interjected. You skipped his funeral, I continued, my voice rising, to look at real estate in Oregon? Sedona, Caleb corrected. We looked at the business plan in Sedona. The property is in Oregon. You left me alone, I said, standing up. My legs felt shaky, but my hands were clenched into fists. I stood in the rain. I watched them put my 7-year-old boy in the ground, and you were drinking champagne and planning how to spend the payout from his death. Natalie, you're twisting it, my mother snapped, her benevolent mask slipping. You're being dramatic. We are trying to help you. Help me? I grabbed a heavy ceramic vase from the side table. It was blue. Lucas had picked it out for me for Mother's Day 2 years ago. I didn't even think. I just swung my arm. The vase flew across the room. It smashed against the wall, inches from Caleb's head. Crash. Shards of blue pottery exploded outward. Caleb ducked, yelping like a kicked dog. My mother screamed, clutching her pearls. Get out, I said. My voice wasn't a scream. It was a growl. It was a sound I didn't know I could make. Get out of my house. You're crazy, Brianna shrieked, jumping up from the sofa. Mom, she's lost it. She's actually psychotic. Natalie. My father tried to step forward, his face red. Calm down. You are hysterical. This proves our point. You are mentally unstable. You can't be trusted with that money. It's not your money, I screamed, the dam finally breaking. It's Lucas's. It's the price of his life. And you vultures want to turn it into a spa? Get out. Get out before I call the police. I grabbed another object, a heavy book from the coffee table, and raised it. They scrambled. The facade of the loving family dissolved instantly. They were just rats fleeing a sinking ship. Caleb pushed Brianna toward the door. My mother grabbed her purse, shooting me a look of pure venom. You're selfish, Natalie, she yelled from the hallway. You've always been selfish, hoarding that money while your family suffers. Lucas would be ashamed of you. That name again. They used him like a weapon. Out, I roared. They slammed the front door behind them. The house shook. I stood in the middle of the living room, chest heaving, surrounded by the shattered remains of the blue vase. I looked at the shards on the floor. I didn't cry. The tears were gone. I felt clear. For the first time since the surgery, the fog was gone. I knew exactly who they were, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The silence didn't last long. 10 minutes after they left, the assault began. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. Then again, then again. It was a relentless buzzing, like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I picked it up. Text from Mom. I can't believe you threw things at us. We are your family. We are only trying to protect you. Call me when you're medicated. Text from Brianna. You almost hit Caleb. You're lucky he doesn't sue you for assault. We're staying at the Marriott. You need to apologize and wire the deposit by Friday or we lose the property. Voicemail from Dad. Natalie, pick up. This is ridiculous. I've been talking to your Aunt Linda. She agrees with us. You're not thinking straight. That money is going to ruin you. We need to secure the asset. Call me. Then came the flying monkeys. Aunt Linda, who I hadn't seen since Christmas 3 years ago. Cousin Mike, who only called when he needed bail money. They were all suddenly very concerned about my mental state and my financial burden. My parents had launched a PR campaign against me. They were spinning the narrative. I was the crazy, grieving mother who was hoarding wealth and attacking her loving family. I turned the phone off. I couldn't block them. Not yet. I needed to know what they were thinking. Information was ammunition. I went to my laptop. It was 2 a.m. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty chairs. I saw the Sedona video. I needed to understand the desperation. Why now? Why were they pushing so hard for this Oregon scheme? My father always talked big game, but this felt frantic. I opened a browser window. I typed in the name of my father's bank. First National. I stared at the login screen. The hard way. There was no hacker friend to call. There was no magic software. There was just me, sitting in the dark, trying to guess the password of a man who hadn't changed his worldview since 1985. I tried the obvious ones first. User ID, Martin Davis, 1960. Password 123. Result, access denied. User ID, M. Davis, business. Password, money. Result, access denied. I rubbed my temples. Think, Natalie. What is his ego made of? What does he value? He valued status. He valued the appearance of winning. I tried user ID, Martin Davis, CEO. Password, winner, 1960. Result, access denied. I was locked out after 3 tries. I stared at the screen, frustrated tears pricking my eyes. I couldn't get into the bank. Okay, public records. I went to the county clerk's website. This was public. Anyone could look this up if they knew where to dig. I searched for my parents' address. The page loaded. My heart stopped. There was a red flag next to the property entry. Notice of default. Date filed. 3 weeks ago. I scrolled down. They hadn't paid their mortgage in 6 months. The bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings. The auction date was set for 60 days from now. I opened another tab. Court records. I searched for Caleb's name. Caleb Reynolds. Nothing. I frowned. That was impossible. A man who claimed to be a venture capitalist had to have a paper trail. No LLCs. No business licenses. Then I searched criminal records. Just a hunch. Caleb Reynolds. Result. 1 hit. Petty theft. 3 years ago. Dismissed. But then I saw an alias listed in a cross-reference file. Charles Miller. I typed in Charles Miller. The screen filled with text. Judgment, $45,000. Unpaid gambling debts, New Jersey. Judgment, $12,000. Credit card default, Nevada. I sat back, the glow of the laptop illuminating my horrified face. They weren't just greedy, they were drowning. My parents were losing their house. Caleb was running from debt collectors. They viewed Lucas's death not just as a tragedy, but as a lifeline. A literal get-out-of-jail-free card. They needed that $2.5 million to wipe the slate clean. That's why they were so aggressive. That's why they couldn't wait. They were terrified. The next morning, I found Caleb on my doorstep. He wasn't wearing the unbuttoned shirt this time. He was wearing a costume. It was a navy blue blazer, crisp khaki pants, and loafers. He was holding a leather portfolio. He looked like a stock photo of trustworthy financial advisor. He didn't wait to be invited in. When I opened the door, he just stepped past me, bringing a wave of expensive, cloying cologne into the hallway. "Look, Nat," he said, holding up his hands, "I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday." I stood by the door, my hand still on the knob. "You think?" "Emotions were high," he said, pacing my living room like he was measuring it for furniture. "I get it. You're emotional. You're a woman in mourning. You're not thinking logically." I gritted my teeth. "And you are?" "I'm the strategy guy," he said, tapping his temple. "That's what I do. I see the big picture." He sat down on my sofa, the one I had vacuumed the glass shards off of 3 hours ago, and spread his arms wide. He started mansplaining my own finances to me. "See, here's the thing about liquidity," he said, his voice smooth and condescending. "Cash is trash, Natalie. Inflation eats it. If you leave that money in a bank, you're losing money every second. You need high-yield assets. You need hard property." "Like a wellness sanctuary in Oregon," I said dryly. "Exactly. The ROI on wellness tourism is massive right now. 300% markup on kale salads. It's a gold mine." He threw around buzzwords like synergy and vertical integration and legacy building. He clearly didn't know what half of them meant. He was just repeating things he'd heard on podcasts. "You need a man's perspective on this," he said with a straight face. "You're too close to the situation. You're too soft. Brianna has the vision. I have the acumen. You have the capital. It's the perfect triangle." "And what do I get?" I asked, "besides a lighter bank account?" "You get to be the silent partner," he said, smiling like he was offering me a gift. "You get to feel like you're helping. Think of it as investing in love, investing in family." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "And honestly, Nat, it's the least you can do. After everything your parents have done for you." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was a con artist in a polyester blazer, lecturing me on family duty. "I'm going to ask you to leave, Caleb," I said. "My answer is no. I'm not investing. I'm not transferring the money." He stopped smiling. The transformation was instant. The charming entrepreneur vanished, and something ugly took his place. He stood up slowly. He didn't look like a stock photo anymore. He looked like a shark. "You really should reconsider, Natalie," he said. His voice dropped an octave. It wasn't smooth anymore. It was cold. "We'd hate for things to get messy." "Messy?" I took a step back. "Is that a threat?" He took a step toward me, invading my personal space. "We know about the lawsuit. We know about the settlement details. And we know about the timeline of that night." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What night?" "The night Lucas got sick," he whispered. "The night his appendix burst." I froze. "What about it?" "People talk, Nat," he said, examining his fingernails. "Malpractice suits are tricky. Sometimes doctors make mistakes, but sometimes parents make mistakes too." He looked up, his eyes flat and dead. "Maybe you waited too long to call the ambulance. Maybe you were too busy working on a project to notice he was running a fever. Maybe you were negligent." The room spun. I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's a lie. I called 911 the second he screamed." "Did you?" He smirked. "Or did you wait 20 minutes? 30? Who really knows? But if a rumor started circulating, if people started asking questions about why you got such a big payout so quickly, it might look like hush money. It might look like you let your son die for a check." I couldn't breathe. The cruelty was absolute. He was threatening to rewrite the worst night of my life. He was threatening to blame me for my son's death, to blackmail me into funding his scam. "Imagine what that would do to your career," he continued softly, "to your reputation. The grieving mother who was actually a monster. The internet would eat you alive." He was right. The internet wouldn't care about the truth. They would destroy me. I looked at him, and for a second I saw red. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to tear his eyes out. But then a strange clarity washed over me. If I fought him now, he would release the rumor. If I kicked him out, they would burn me down. I had to stop being the victim. I had to start being the crisis manager. I forced my shoulders to slump. I forced my facial muscles to collapse into a mask of defeat. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them, I made sure they were wet. "You wouldn't," I whispered, injecting a tremor into my voice. "You wouldn't do that to me." Caleb straightened his jacket, seeing my weakness. He thought he had won. "Try me," he said. "We just want what's best for the family, Nia. Don't force our hand." I looked at the floor. I can't believe this." "Believe it," he said. "Now, are we going to do business or are we going to war?" I took a shaky breath. I needed time. I needed evidence. I needed to trap him so thoroughly that he would never see the light of day again. "I need a few days," I said, looking up at him with feigned fear. "The money. It's in a holding account. It takes time to move." "How much time?" 3 days, I lied. "I can have the paperwork ready by Friday." He grinned. It was a victorious, predatory grin. "See? That wasn't so hard. Smart girl. You're making the right choice." He reached out and patted my cheek. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed not to bite his hand off. "Friday," he said. "We'll have the papers drawn up." "Don't make me come back, Nat." He turned and walked out the door, whistling. He walked with the swagger of a man who had just secured his fortune. I locked the door behind him. I slid the deadbolt, then the chain. I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I went to my office and pulled out a fresh notebook. I wrote Caleb Reynolds, Charles Miller at the top of the page. Then I wrote Mom and Dad, foreclosure. They wanted a war? They got one. But I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't hack bank accounts and I couldn't track down gambling debts in New Jersey from my laptop. I needed a professional. I remembered a name. Victor Vance. He was a private investigator I had used once for a corporate background check at my old job. He was expensive, he was grumpy, and he was ruthless. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number. "Vance Investigations," a gravelly voice answered. "Victor," I said, my voice steady and cold. "This is Natalie Davis. I have a job for you, and I have an unlimited budget." "What's the target?" he asked. "My family," I said. "I want you to dig up every skeleton they have, and I want you to bring me the bones." I met Victor Vance at a diner in the Mission District, a place that smelled of stale grease and despair. It was the kind of place where people went to be forgotten. I sat in a booth with peeling red vinyl, clutching my purse against my chest. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000. It was my own savings, not the settlement money. I hadn't touched a cent of Lucas's money. I refused to. But writing that check from my personal account felt like cutting off a limb. That was my emergency fund. That was my escape money. Victor slid into the booth opposite me. He didn't look like a television detective. He looked like a retired plumber who had seen too much. He wore a stained windbreaker and looked tired. "You have the retainer?" he asked. No pleasantries. "No, sorry for your loss." I nodded. I pulled the envelope out and slid it across the sticky table. My hand trembled. "It's all there. 5,000. He opened the envelope, thumbing through the check. He didn't smile. He just tucked it into his jacket pocket. "All right. I did the preliminary dive last night after you called. You want the good news or the bad news?" "There's good news?" I asked, a flicker of hope sparking in my chest. "No," he said, signaling the waitress for coffee. "The good news is that I found everything. The bad news is, it's worse than you think. Much worse." My stomach dropped. I thought I was prepared. I thought I knew they were greedy and desperate. But the look in Victor's eyes, a look of genuine, weary pity, told me I had only scratched the surface. "How bad?" I whispered. You might want to order a drink, he said. He reached into a battered leather satchel and pulled out a thick manila folder. It hit the table with a heavy thud. I stared at the folder. It was thick, too thick. That wasn't just a few unpaid bills. That was a dossier of ruin. Open it, he said. I opened the file. The first page was a credit report summary for Martin and Evelyn Davis. I scanned the numbers and my breath hitched. I had to read them twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Credit score, I read aloud, 420. They're toxic, Victor said, blowing on his black coffee. Radioactive, look at the liabilities column. I looked. My parents, who drove a Mercedes and belonged to the country club, were $300,000 in debt on credit cards alone. There were 6 cards listed, maxed out, over limit. They've been living on credit for a decade, Victor explained, rotating balances, paying one card with another. It's a house of cards, Natalie, and the wind just blew. I turned the page. There was a copy of a bank statement from First National. It was dated 3 days ago. The balance, I whispered, negative $4,000. They're overdrawn, Victor said, and look at the transaction history for last week. I ran my finger down the list of purchases. Sedona Resort and Spa, $4,000. Southwest Airlines, $2,000. Cartier, $8,000. The ring, I said, realizing it. They bought Brianna's engagement ring on a credit card that was already underwater. They leveraged everything they had left on that trip, Victor said. They bet the farm that you would come through with the settlement money. They didn't skip the funeral just to party, Natalie. They skipped it because they were terrified. They needed to lock down Caleb. They think he's their golden ticket. But Caleb is broke, I said. I found the judgment. Oh, he's not just broke, Victor said, tapping a section of the file labeled Charles Miller. He's dangerous. That judgment in New Jersey? It's not a bank loan. It's a private loan. From a guy named Sal. A loan shark? A bookie, Victor corrected. Your future brother-in-law has a gambling problem. He owes 50 grand to people who break kneecaps for a living. That's why he's pushing for the Oregon property. He needs to wash the money. He needs to skim 50 grand off the top of the renovation budget to pay off his debt before they find him. I felt sick, physically sick. My parents were bankrupting themselves to impress a man who was trying to rob them to save his own skin. It was a circle of delusions, a snake eating its own tail. They're all drowning, I said, closing the file, and they're trying to use me as the life raft. And there's one more thing, Victor said. Page 12. I opened the file back up to page 12. It was a supplemental credit card statement. It was issued to Evelyn Davis, but the authorized user was listed as Caleb Reynolds. My parents gave him a card? I asked, horrified. To cover business expenses for the wedding planning, Victor said dryly. But look at the charges. I looked. It was a list of transactions from the last 2 months. The W Hotel, San Francisco. Tuesday, 1 p.m. The W Hotel, San Francisco. Tuesday, 1 p.m. Victoria's Secret, $300. Steakhouse 55, dinner for 2, $400. Wait, I said. Brianna works on Tuesdays. She has her yoga instructor certification classes. Exactly, Victor said. And those lingerie purchases? Size small. Brianna is a medium. I stared at the paper. The black ink seemed to swim before my eyes. He's cheating on her, I whispered. He's living off my parents' ruin, pretending to be a millionaire and using their last remaining credit to sleep with other women. I thought about Brianna, my shallow, self-absorbed sister. She was annoying. She was greedy. But she was being humiliated. She was parading around a man who was laughing at her behind her back. He's a parasite, I said. He's a con man, Victor corrected, and he's found the perfect mark, A family that is so desperate to appear rich that they won't ask any hard questions. I closed the folder. The anger I had felt earlier, the hot, explosive rage, was gone. It was replaced by something colder, something sharper. I didn't just want to stop them. I didn't just want to say no. I wanted to destroy him. I wanted to expose him so thoroughly that he would never be able to show his face in this city again. "Can you get proof?" I asked. "Of the cheating? Of the gambling?" "I can get photos," Victor said. "I can get recordings. But it'll cost you. Surveillance isn't cheap." "Do it," I said. "I don't care what it costs." I texted my mother that afternoon. Text: "You were right. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow? I want to apologize. And I want to talk about the Oregon project." She replied in 30 seconds. Text: "Thank God, Natalie. We knew you'd come around. We'll make a reservation at Le Jardin, 1 p.m. Bring Caleb." Le Jardin. Of course. The most expensive French restaurant in the city. They were going to celebrate their victory on my dime. I arrived 5 minutes late. I wore a simple gray dress and no makeup. I wanted to look defeated. I wanted to look like the broken daughter returning to the fold. They were already seated at a prime table by the window. They had ordered a bottle of champagne. My father was beaming. My mother looked smugly satisfied. Caleb was leaning back in his chair, looking like he owned the place. "Natalie," my mother cried, waving me over. "Sit, sit, we ordered the seafood tower." I sat down. I kept my head lowered. "I'm sorry about yesterday," I said, my voice quiet. I snapped. "The grief, it's been hard." "We know, honey," my mother said, patting my hand. "We forgive you. We know you weren't yourself. That negative energy, it clouds your judgment." "I realized you were right," I lied. "The money, it is heavy. I don't want it sitting there reminding me of him." "Smart girl," my father said, pouring me a glass of champagne. "So, the transfer? Have you initiated it?" "I went to the bank this morning," I said. I pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app. I had transferred $500 from my savings into a new account I named Lucas Trust, but I had edited the HTML on the browser page on my phone earlier to display the full settlement amount just for this moment. A simple trick, but effective. I set the phone on the table, angled so Caleb could see it. "I set up the account," I said. $2,500,000. It's ready to go." Caleb's eyes locked onto the screen. I watched his pupils physically dilate. It was primal. He looked like a wolf seeing a wounded deer. He licked his lips. That is fantastic, Nat," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You have no idea how much good this is going to do for the family, for Lucas's legacy." "I want to see the property," I said. "Before I sign the final release, I want to see where the money is going." Caleb hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Of course. We can fly up this weekend?" "Great," I said. "Book the tickets." I knew they couldn't afford the tickets. I knew they would put it on another card. I was counting on it. We landed in Portland on Saturday morning and rented an SUV. Caleb drove. He drove too fast, aggressive and jerky, talking loudly about vision and potential. We drove 3 hours south into the deep woods. The road turned from pavement to gravel, then to dirt. "It's secluded," Brianna chirped from the back seat. "That's the point. Total immersion in nature." We pulled up to a rusted metal gate. A sign hung from one hinge, "Camp Cleaver, Logging and Timber." Caleb got out and forced the gate open. We drove through. The wellness sanctuary was a dump. There were 3 dilapidated cabins with caved-in roofs. The ground was a mud pit. Piles of rusting machinery were scattered everywhere. The vineyard potential was a steep, rocky hill covered in blackberries and poison oak. I stepped out of the car, my boots sinking into the muck. The air smelled of rot and damp earth. "I know it looks rough," Caleb said quickly, sensing my hesitation, But you have to have vision, Natalie. See past the rust. Imagine glass yurts. Imagine a cedar sauna right there. He pointed to a pile of wet logs. It's rustic, I said. It's authentic, Brianna said, pulling out her phone to take a selfie in front of a broken tractor. #restoration. #farmhouse vibes. I looked at my parents. They were standing by the car, looking uncomfortable. My mother was trying to keep her heels out of the mud. My father was looking at the collapsed roof of the main cabin with a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "It will take a lot of work," my father muttered. "That's what the capital is for, Martin," Caleb said, clapping him on the back. "We got it. We rebuild. $2.5 million is more than enough to turn this into a 5-star resort." I did the math in my head. Demolition alone would cost $500,000. Infrastructure, water, power. $2.5 million wouldn't even finish the main lodge. This wasn't a business plan, it was a money pit. And Caleb knew it. He didn't care if the resort ever opened. He just needed the money to hit the account so he could pay his debts and disappear. "It's perfect," I said, forcing a smile. "I can see it." Caleb relaxed. "I knew you would. You have the eye, Nat." We stayed at a motel in the nearest town that night. It was a roadside dive with neon signs buzzing outside. I sat in the small bar attached to the motel, nursing a club soda. I was exhausted. Maintaining the mask was draining me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it. I had set my voice recorder app to ready. Caleb walked in. He spotted me and smiled. That predatory, shark-like smile. He waved the bartender over and ordered a double bourbon. "Celebrating?" I asked. "Planning," he said, sliding onto the stool next to me. He leaned in too close. He smelled of sweat and desperation. "You were great today, Nat. Really great. You handled the vision thing better than I expected." "I just want what's best for the family," I said. "The family," he scoffed. He took a heavy swig of his drink. "Let's be real, Natalie. Your parents. They're dead weight. Martin couldn't run a lemonade stand. And Brianna—" He shook his head, laughing softly. "She's a child. She thinks running a business is just picking out throw pillows and posting on Instagram. She has no idea about the grind." I felt a surge of protectiveness from my sister, which surprised me. "She's your fiancée," I said. "She's a means to an end," he muttered. Then he caught himself. He turned to me, his eyes glassy. "I mean, I love her, obviously, but she's not like you. You're a killer. I can see it. You buried your son and you're standing here talking numbers. That's strength. That's sexy." I fought the urge to recoil. He was hitting on me. He was actually hitting on me. "I need a partner, Nia," he whispered, using a nickname only my dad used. "Not a dependent. Once we get this money, once the transfer clears, maybe we rethink the structure. Maybe you and I run the show. We cut the dead weight." "What are you saying, Caleb?" I asked, angling my phone slightly toward him. "I'm saying we could be a power couple," he said. He placed his hand on my knee. His palm was hot and damp. "We secure the asset, we control the funds, and if Brianna doesn't like it, well, businesses evolve." "And the money?" I asked. "You need it fast, don't you?" He stiffened. "What makes you say that?" "You just seem eager." He leaned in, looking around the empty bar. "I have existing obligations, investors, serious men. I need to liquidate some positions to pay them off, 50 large, by next week, or things get bad." "Bad like a lawsuit?" "Bad like physical," he said darkly. "They don't sue, they handle things. That's why I need the transfer, Nat. I need to clear the deck so we can build this empire. You help me with this, and I'll make sure you're taken care of." He squeezed my knee. "I understand," I said softly. "I'll help you, Caleb. I won't let anything happen to you." "I knew it," he grinned. "Partners." "Partners," I echoed. I stood up. "I'm going to bed. We have a big day tomorrow." I walked back to my room. My skin crawled where he had touched me. I went into the bathroom and scrubbed my knee with soap until it was red, Then I played back the recording. She's a means to an end. 50 large. Serious men. They handle things. I had him. I had the confession. I had the motive. Now I just needed to spring the trap. Monday morning found me in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Mr. Sullivan's law firm. The air smelled of old paper and billable hours. Mr. Sullivan sat across from me, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, looking at the document I had asked him to draft. He looked like a man who was watching a car drive the wrong way down a highway. "Natalie," he said, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose, "I need you to understand what you are doing. This is highly irregular. It's aggressive." "Is it legal?" I asked. I sat with my back straight, my hands folded on the table to hide the tremor. I hadn't slept in 36 hours. The recording of Caleb hitting on me was playing on a loop in my head. "Technically, yes," Mr. Sullivan sighed. "It's a conditional deed of gift. But these conditions, Clause 14b is essentially a trap. You are setting a standard of conduct that saints would struggle to meet, let alone—" He trailed off, too polite to finish the sentence. "Let alone my family," I finished for him. "Clause 14b, he read aloud, his finger tracing the dense text. "The morality and legality provision. It states that the funds are to be held in a revocable trust for a probationary period of 6 months. If any beneficiary is found to have committed a felony, a misdemeanor involving dishonesty, or is found to be in violation of marital vows, specifically regarding fidelity, the entire principal sum shall immediately revert to the secondary beneficiary." He looked up at me. "And the secondary beneficiary is the Lucas Davis Medical Negligence Fund. A charity I established this morning," I said. "It pays for legal aid for families who have lost children to medical error." Mr. Sullivan leaned back. "They won't sign this, Natalie. If they have a lawyer worth his salt, he will tell them this is a poison pill. It gives you the power to revoke the gift based on behavior. It's a leash." "They don't have a lawyer," I said. "They have arrogance, and they have desperation. They need the money so badly they won't read the fine print. They'll just see the zeros." "You're counting on their greed blinding them," he observed. "I'm counting on them being exactly who they are," I said. "Print it. 3 copies." I brought the documents to my parents' house that evening. The atmosphere was electric, vibrating with a frantic kind of joy that made my skin crawl. They had set the dining room table with the good china, the Wedgwood plates we weren't allowed to touch when we were kids. There were fresh flowers. There was another bottle of expensive wine. It felt like a celebration. It felt like they had won the lottery. Caleb was already there, pouring drinks. He winked at me when I walked in, a conspiratorial gesture that made bile rise in my throat. He thought we were partners. He thought we were conspiring against Brianna. "The Savior returns!" my father boomed, his face flushed. He looked better than he had in days. The prospect of salvation had given him a second wind. "Sit, sit. Mom made your favorite, roast chicken." I sat down. I placed the thick blue folder on the table. The sound it made, a heavy, flat thud, silenced the room for a second. "Is that it?" Brianna asked, her eyes glued to the folder. "Is that the transfer?" "It's the paperwork," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The deed of gift. Once this is signed, the trust is activated, and the funds are allocated for the Oregon project." Caleb reached for it first. Of course he did. He flipped it open, scanning the pages with a practiced furrow in his brow, pretending to be the savvy businessman doing his due diligence. "Standard boilerplate," he muttered, turning pages too fast to actually read them. "Liability waivers, tax implications. Yeah, looks standard." He didn't read Clause 14b. He didn't even pause on page 12. He just wanted to get to the signature line. "Wait," I said, placing a hand over the page as he reached for a pen. "You really should read it, Caleb, especially the section on fiduciary responsibility. It outlines the conditions of the trust." My mother groaned. She actually groaned. "Oh, for God's sake, Natalie, stop trying to control everything. We get it. It's a lot of money. We promise to be responsible." "I'm just trying to be thorough, Mom," I said softly. "It's $2.5 million. I want to make sure everyone understands the terms." "We understand," Brianna whined. "We're building a sanctuary. It's for Lucas. Just let us sign it so we can pop the champagne." "She's doing this on purpose," my father muttered, glaring at me. "She wants to drag it out. She wants to make us beg." "I don't want you to beg," I said. "I want you to be sure." "We are sure," Caleb said firmly. He looked at me and his eyes said, "Don't blow this for us, partner." "It's fine, Nat. We trust you. You had your lawyer draw it up. It's solid." He signed. He signed with a flourish, a big looping signature that took up too much space. Caleb Reynolds. Brianna signed next, dotting her I with a little heart. She was signing away her future to a man who was stealing from her, and she was drawing hearts. My parents signed last. My father's hand shook as he put pen to paper. He wasn't seeing a contract. He was seeing the foreclosure notice disappearing. He was seeing his country club membership being reinstated. "Done," my father exhaled, dropping the pen. "It's done." "When does the wire hit?" Caleb asked, trying to sound casual but failing. "It takes 48 hours for the initial processing," I lied. "But the contract is binding as of now. You can show this to the sellers to hold the property." 48 hours, Caleb repeated. He did a quick mental calculation. "That's Wednesday, perfect." They cheered. My mother actually hugged me, a stiff, awkward embrace that smelled of desperation. "You did the right thing, Natalie," she whispered in my ear. "You finally stepped up." I stood there, stiff as a board, letting them celebrate. They clinked glasses. They toasted to the future. They toasted to the Lucas Davis Wellness Sanctuary. They had just signed a confession. They had legally agreed that if they were criminals, they got nothing. And I had the evidence in my bag that proved they were all guilty. I left the dinner as soon as I could, claiming a headache. The truth was, I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. The air felt recycled, heavy with lies. I sat in my car in their driveway for a moment, watching them through the lighted window. They were laughing. My father was refilling glasses. Brianna was showing off her ring again. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Mr. Sullivan. Text. They signed. Execute the setup for the secondary trust. Do not release funds to the primary. He replied instantly. Text. Understood. The trap is set. Be careful, Natalie. I drove home. The city lights blurred past me. I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Relief, yes, but also a deep, aching sadness. I had just severed the last ties. Once I pulled this trigger, there was no going back. I would be an orphan. I walked into my house. It was quiet. I liked the quiet now. It didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt safe. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were steady. The overthinking engine in my brain finally slowed down. I didn't have to guess anymore. I didn't have to wonder if they loved me. I had the answer in ink. The phone rang. It was late. Past 11. I looked at the caller ID. Victor Vance. My heart skipped a beat. A call at this hour meant something big, something that couldn't wait for an email. Natalie? Victor's voice was rough, sounding like he'd been smoking for 3 hours straight. You sitting down? I'm standing, I said, leaning against the counter. What is it? Did you find the gambling records? I found those yesterday, he said dismissively. This is different. I was running a deep dive on the alias, Charles Miller. I cross-referenced it with vital records in every state west of the Mississippi. It took a while because the digital records in Nevada are a mess. Nevada? I asked. The credit card debt? No, he said. Clark County, Las Vegas, Marriage License Bureau. The room seemed to tilt. Marriage license? Dated 5 years ago, Victor said. Charles Miller and Samantha Higgins. I checked for a divorce decree, Natalie. I checked everywhere. There isn't one. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. You're saying... He's still married, Victor said. Your future brother-in-law is a bigamist. He's legally married to a woman in Nevada. Bigamy. That was a felony. Clause 14B. If any beneficiary is found to have committed a felony, that was it. That was the nail in the coffin. It wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just gambling. It was a crime that invalidated the entire marriage to Brianna before it even happened. Where is she? I asked. The wife. I tracked her down, Victor said. She's not in Vegas anymore. She's in Reno, trailer park on the outskirts, works at a diner. Send me the address, I said. Natalie, what are you going to do? I'm going to meet her, I said. I'm going to fly there tomorrow. You don't need to go, Victor argued. I can send an associate. We can get a statement. No, I said. I need to see her. I need to know if she knows. And if she doesn't, I need to be the one to tell her. And I need to bring her here. Here? The wedding is in 3 weeks, I said. I think Caleb needs a surprise guest. I booked the first flight to Reno out of SFO. I didn't tell anyone. I told my office I was taking a personal day. I told my parents, via a scheduled text, that I was meeting with the bank to finalize the wire transfer. The flight was short, less than an hour, but it felt like an eternity. I stared out the window at the clouds, my mind racing. What if she was in on it? What if they were partners? What if she was just as bad as him? No. Victor said she lived in a trailer park. Caleb was trying to buy a $2 million property. Con artists don't leave their partners in poverty. He had abandoned her. I landed in Reno. The airport was filled with slot machines and the sound of electronic chiming. It was depressing. I rented a compact car, a nondescript white sedan, and plugged the address Victor had given me into the GPS. Sun Valley Trailer Estates. I drove out of the city into the high desert. The landscape was brown and dusty. The heat shimmered off the asphalt. It was a stark contrast to the lush green of the wellness sanctuary fantasy my family was spinning. This was the reality of Caleb's world. I pulled into the trailer park. It was a grid of aluminum and faded siding. There were tricycles in the dirt yards. There were dogs barking behind chain-link fences. It smelled of dust and hot metal. I found Lot 42. It was a single-wide trailer, beige with a brown stripe. It was clean, though. The small patch of dirt in front was raked. There were a few pots of geraniums trying to survive the heat. I parked the car. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was the hard way. I wasn't just reading a file. I was walking into a stranger's life and dropping a bomb. I knocked on the flimsy metal door. It rattled in the frame. "Coming!" a voice called out. It sounded tired. The door opened. A woman stood there. She was younger than me, maybe 28, but she looked worn. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands escaping to frame a face that had once been pretty, but was now etched with exhaustion. She wore a diner uniform, a pink polo shirt with a stain on the collar and black pants. She held a toddler on her hip, a little boy with messy hair and wide eyes. "If you're here about the electric bill," she said immediately, her shoulders sagging, "I get paid on Friday. I called the company." "I'm not here for the bill," I said. "My name is Natalie. I think we know the same man." She frowned, shifting the toddler's weight. "I don't know you." "Do you know Charles Miller?" I asked. The color drained from her face instantly. It was like someone had pulled a plug. She gripped the door frame. "Charlie," she whispered. Is he in trouble? Did something happen?" She didn't ask, "Who is he?" She asked, "Is he in trouble?" She still cared, or she was still afraid. "He's not hurt," I said, "but he is in trouble. He's in San Francisco. He's going by the name Caleb Reynolds." Her eyes widened. "Caleb? He used that name when we met. He said it was his stage name." "Stage name? He wanted to be an actor," she said, looking down. Before he left." He's engaged, I said gently, to my sister. They're getting married in 3 weeks. Samantha, that was her name, stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then tears welled up in her eyes, fast and hot. Married, she choked out. But we're married. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. She stepped back, opening the door wide. You better come in. I stepped inside. The trailer was sweltering. The air conditioner hummed loudly but didn't seem to do much. The living room was tiny, dominated by a worn sofa and a pile of toys. There was another child sitting on the floor watching cartoons. A girl, maybe 5. She had dark hair. She had Caleb's eyes. I stared at the girl. My breath caught in my throat. He had 2 children. He had a wife and 2 children, and he had left them in a tin box in the desert while he drank champagne in Sedona. I'm so sorry, Samantha said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The place is a mess. I picked up an extra shift and... Don't apologize, I said, please. We sat at the small kitchen table. I told her everything. I told her about the wedding, the fake business, the stolen money. I told her about the debt he owed and the lies he was telling. He told me he was going to California to find work, Samantha said, her voice trembling. 5 years ago, he said he'd send for us. He sent money for the first 3 months. Then, nothing. I tried to call. The number was disconnected. I thought maybe he was dead. He's not dead, I said. He's living in a penthouse hotel suite on my parents' credit card. Samantha looked at her children. The anger that crossed her face wasn't like mine. Mine was cold. Hers was hot. It was the anger of a mother who had watched her children go hungry while their father played rich. He owes us, she said. He owes us 5 years of child support. He owes us everything. I know, I said, and I'm going to help you get it. But I need you to do something for me. Something hard. What? She asked. I need you to come to San Francisco, I said. I need you to come to the wedding. I sat at Samantha's scratched Formica table, watching her hands shake as she held the coffee mug. The air in the trailer was still and hot, but the energy between us was electric. It was the shared frequency of 2 women who had been burned by the same fire. I can't afford a flight to San Francisco, Samantha said, her voice small. I can barely afford groceries this week. And a dress? A hotel? Natalie, look around. I'm drowning. I'm not asking you to pay, I said. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Her skin was rough, calloused from scrubbing diner counters. I have a separate account, my own savings. I will book the flights. I will book the suite. I will buy the clothes for the kids. Why? She asked, looking me in the eye. Why are you doing this for us? You don't even know us. Because he took 5 years from you, I said, and he's trying to take the rest of my life from me. He wants to steal my son's legacy to pay for his gambling debts. I can't let him win, Samantha, and neither can you. She looked at her daughter, who was coloring on the floor. The little girl looked so much like Caleb, it hurt. She had his chin, his smile, but she didn't have his emptiness. He owes them, Samantha whispered. My son needs dental work. My daughter wants to take dance lessons. I have to tell them no every single day because their father decided to play pretend in California. He will pay, I promised. The contract he signed, the one he didn't read, it has a clause. If he commits a crime, the money he's trying to steal reverts to a trust. But I control the trust, and I'm making you a promise right now. I will use every legal avenue to garnish his wages. I will make sure that every cent he earns in the prison laundry goes to these kids. Prison? Samantha asked. Bigamy is a felony, I said. Fraud is a felony. We aren't just crashing a wedding, Sam. We're serving a warrant. She took a deep breath. She looked at the pile of overdue bills on the counter. Then she looked at me and a fire lit up in her eyes. It was the first spark of hope I had seen in her. Okay, she said. When do we leave? I flew back to San Francisco the next morning. The wedding was still 3 weeks away, or so I thought. 2 days after I returned, Brianna burst into my office. I had returned to work trying to maintain normalcy, but my focus was entirely on the trap. "Nia!" she shrieked, spinning into the room in a swirl of white tulle. She was wearing a dress that looked suspiciously like a bridal gown. "We had a brilliant idea, a total pivot." I looked up from my spreadsheet. "A pivot? Why wait?" she asked, throwing her hands up. "The contract is signed. The money is basically ours. We want to strike while the iron is hot. My engagement metrics on Instagram are peaking right now. If we wait 3 weeks, the algorithm might bury us. So we're moving it up," she beamed. "We're combining the wedding with the official Wellness Sanctuary launch party. We're calling it the merger. Isn't that clever? We're doing it this Saturday." Saturday? I felt a cold dread pool in my stomach. "Brianna, Saturday is the 24th. "I know," she said, oblivious. "It's perfect. A Saturday wedding in the city? Iconic." "It's Lucas's birthday," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. "He would have been 8 years old." Brianna's smile faltered for a microsecond, then returned, brighter and more toxic than before. "Oh, Nia, don't be morbid. Lucas wouldn't want us to be sad forever. Think of it as reclaiming the day. We're turning a negative into a positive. We can even do a little toast to him. It'll be sweet." A toast. She wanted to use my dead son as a prop in her wedding content. She wanted to erase his birthday and replace it with her anniversary. "You want to get married on the day my son was born?" I asked. "It's about new beginnings," she insisted. "And listen, since it's so last minute, the venue fee is double. Mom and Dad are tapped out until the vineyard profits start rolling in. We need an advance. Just $200,000 for the deposit. To make it perfect." They wanted me to pay for the party that was erasing my son. I looked at her. I looked at the absolute void where her empathy should be. "Okay," I said. The word tasted like poison. "I'll handle the deposit. I'll wire it directly to the venue." "You're the best," she squealed, hugging me. "This is going to be the wedding of the century." I didn't wire the money to the venue. I wired it to an escrow account with a specific instruction: funds to be released only upon receipt of a valid marriage license. A license Caleb could never get. 2 days before the wedding, I drove to my parents' house to drop off the confirmation of the deposit. I pulled into the driveway and froze. There were black garbage bags lined up along the curb, dozens of them. At first, I thought they were just cleaning up, but then I saw a flash of orange fabric sticking out of a torn bag. It was a neon orange t-shirt, Lucas's favorite color. I parked the car and walked slowly toward the curb. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached out and pulled at the plastic. The bag ripped open. A stuffed triceratops with a missing eye spilled out. A stack of drawing pads filled with crayon monsters. A small, worn-out baseball glove. These were Lucas's things. I had packed them into storage bins and asked my parents to keep them in their garage because my apartment was too small and too painful. I had trusted them with the only physical pieces of my son that remained, and here they were, in the trash. "What are you doing?" I choked out. My mother stepped out onto the porch. She was holding a box of Legos. She dumped it into a bag without hesitation. Clatter. Smash. "Oh, Natalie," she said, sounding annoyed. "Don't make a mess. The garbage truck comes in an hour." "You're throwing away his things?" I screamed. "I asked you to keep them safe." "We need the space," she snapped. "The garage is full of wedding favors. We can't have this clutter. And honestly, Nia, it's morbid. Keeping all these old toys? It's bad energy. Caleb says objects hold on to the vibration of their owners. We can't have death energy in the house when we're trying to launch a business." "Death energy. You're throwing away my son's memory because you think he's haunting your party?" "We're doing this for you," she said, using that sick, condescending tone. "You need to let go. You need to move on. Clinging to these scraps, it's not healthy. It's holding us back." She turned and walked back inside. "Just let the garbage men take it. It's cleaner this way." I knelt on the driveway. I didn't care about my suit. I crawled on the pavement, tearing open bags, retrieving every Lego brick, every drawing, every piece of clothing. I packed them into my car until the back seat was full. I wasn't crying anymore. The part of me that was a daughter died right there on the concrete. My heart turned into a stone, a cold, hard weapon. They wanted clean, I would give them clean. I would scrub their lives so thoroughly they wouldn't recognize themselves. The rehearsal dinner was at a steakhouse that cost more per plate than my parents used to spend on groceries for a month. Everyone was there. The fake friends, the social climbers, the people they wanted to impress. I wore a simple black dress. I sat in the corner, sipping water, watching them laugh. My father was loudly bragging about the Oregon estate to a man he owed money to. Brianna was taking selfies with her lobster tail. I got up to go to the bathroom. As I walked down the quiet hallway near the kitchen, a hand grabbed my arm. It was Caleb. He was drunk. His eyes were glassy and swimming with arrogance. "You look like a widow in mourning," he slurred, pinning me against the wall. "I am a widow, Caleb," I said, my voice ice. "Right," he chuckled. "The grieving mother act. You play it well. But I know the truth. I saw the way you looked at the business plan. You're wasted on grief, Nat. You and we're the sharks. Once this money clears, once we get rid of the dead weight." He leaned in, his bourbon breath hot on my face. "We're going to have so much fun." He tried to kiss my neck. I didn't shove him away. I didn't scream. I placed my hands on his chest and pushed him back gently, just enough to make space. I looked him dead in the eye and smiled. "You're right, Caleb," I whispered. "I have big plans for you. Tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a day you never forget. I have a surprise wedding gift that is going to change your life." He grinned, a wolfish, victorious grin. He thought I meant sex. He thought I meant I was giving him full control. "I can't wait," he said. "Patience," I said, slipping past him. "Good things come to those who wait." I left the dinner early and took a cab to a mid-range hotel directly across the street from the rooftop venue where the wedding was being held. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and knocked on room 412. Samantha opened the door. She looked terrified. The kids were asleep on the pull-out sofa. Is he really going through with it?" she asked, wringing her hands. "He's toasting to it right now," I said. "He thinks he's won the lottery. He has no idea you're here." I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Across the street, the rooftop garden was dark, waiting for the morning. "You need to sleep," I told her. "Tomorrow is going to be a war." "I'm scared, Natalie," she admitted. "What if he talks his way out of it? He's so charming." "He can't talk his way out of a marriage certificate," I said, "and he can't talk his way out of handcuffs." The morning of August 24th dawned bright and cruel. It was the day I should have been making dinosaur-shaped pancakes. Instead, I was putting on my armor. The invitation said heavenly white. It was a strict dress code, a celebration of purity. I put on a black dress. It was floor-length, high-necked, severe. It wasn't a party dress. It was a morning gown. I applied red lipstick. I looked like the angel of death. I arrived at the venue. It was a sea of white roses and white linens. My mother saw me instantly. She marched over, her face flushing purple. "Natalie," she hissed, "what are you doing? You look like a crow. Go change." "I'm mourning my son," I said calmly. "On his birthday." "You are ruining the aesthetic," she screeched. "This is your sister's moment." "Let the guests stare," I said, walking past her. "I don't care." The ceremony began. Brianna stood on a stage, holding a microphone. She looked beautiful and hollow. "Today is about love," she told the crowd. but it's also about loss. We lost my nephew Lucas 3 months ago, and I know he's here with us. He's looking down, smiling, because he knows his legacy is funding our new beginning. He is our angel investor. The crowd sighed with sympathy. My blood boiled. And to my sister, she said, pointing at me, I know you're hurting, but Caleb and I are going to make you proud. That was the signal. I walked up the aisle. My heels clicked on the floorboards like gunshots. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Nia, sit down, Brianna hissed. I took the microphone from her hand. Thank you, Brianna, I said to the crowd. That was a beautiful story. But stories need to be true. I pulled a small remote from my pocket. It controlled the massive LED screen behind them. I have a wedding gift, I announced, a video tribute. I pressed the button. The screen flickered. It wasn't a montage of photos. It was the dash cam footage from my car. The audio boomed. Brianna's voice. If Lucas hadn't died when he did, Natalie would have wasted that money on charity. Now it's ours. That kid is basically my angel investor. He died so I could be rich. The crowd gasped. A collective recoil. My mother covered her mouth. The video cut. It was the recording from the bar. Caleb's voice. She's a means to an end. 50 large. Once the money hits the account, I'm gone. Chaos erupted. People were shouting. Brianna was screaming at Caleb. You said what? She shrieked. I spoke into the mic. One more guest. I pointed to the back. The elevator doors opened. Samantha walked out, holding her children's hands. She walked through the stunned crowd like a queen. She stepped onto the stage. She looked at Caleb. Hello, Charlie, she said. She pulled a folded paper from her purse. You forgot to divorce me. Caleb turned white. He bolted. He ran for the fire escape. Police, I shouted. 2 uniformed officers stepped out from behind the drapes. They tackled him. Charles Miller, the officer said, cuffing him. You are under arrest for bigamy and fraud. Brianna was on the floor, sobbing. My money, my vineyard. Nia, tell them. Tell them we have the money. I held up the torn contract. Clause 14B, I said. Criminal activity voids the trust. The money reverts to the Lucas Davis charity. What? My mother screamed. No, we need that money, the house. We put the house up as collateral for the loan. You did what? My father wheezed, clutching his chest. Chase said your money would cover it, my mother wailed. If you don't pay, they take the house. Then they take the house, I said. The money is gone. It's already in the charity account. You are homeless. I dropped the mic. It hit the floor with a feedback screech. I walked away. I walked past my wailing mother, past my ruined sister, past the man in handcuffs. I walked out of the venue and into the elevator. The doors closed on the ruin of their lives. It has been exactly 90 days since the wedding that wasn't. Caleb, or Charles, pled guilty. The evidence was overwhelming. He is currently serving 8 years in a federal facility for fraud and bigamy. Samantha and the kids are living in a nice apartment in Seattle. I set up a trust for their education. They are finally safe. Brianna was evicted. The internet does not forgive people who call dead children angel investors. She was canceled so hard she had to delete her social media. I heard she's working as a hostess at a chain restaurant in Jersey, going by the name Brenda. My parents lost the house. The bank foreclosed immediately. They are living in a basement apartment in Queens. I saw my mother yesterday. I was walking to my car after the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Lucas Davis Advocacy Center, a legal aid clinic for victims of medical negligence. She was waiting by my car. She looked old. Her hair was gray. Nia, she begged, grabbing my arm. Please, we're eating canned soup. Your father just sits and stares at the wall. We're your parents. Can't you forgive us? I looked at her. I thought about the empty chairs at the funeral. I thought about the trash bags in the driveway. I have forgiven, I said. Her eyes lit up with hope. Really? I've forgiven myself, I said, for trying to buy your love. As for you, you're an adult. You made choices. Now you're living in them. I got in my car and locked the door. She banged on the window, mouthing the word, please. I put the car in drive and pulled away. The sun was shining, the sky was blue. For the first time since Lucas died, I turned on the radio and sang along. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.